Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mercedes Raphael, and I am a manager on our workforce programs team at the Partnership for Public Service. For those of you not familiar with the partnership, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit working to build a better government and stronger democracy through policy advocacy, leadership development, workforce programming, and convening leaders across organizations and sectors. The most tangible impact is seen through our support for the federal workforce by sharing resources, providing plain language explainers, and amplifying the stories of the incredible work that federal employees do for our country every single day. So thank you for your service. I'd like to share a few notes before digging into today's conversation and introducing today's moderator. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit a question through the Q&A function, and we will do our best to answer what we can. If you would like your question to remain anonymous, please be sure to click on that checkbox before submitting your question. You may hear from my colleague Sam throughout the webinar, who is joining us to help dig through your questions and keep us on track. And given the complexity and nuances of the topics we discuss, we may not be able to address every question or associated circumstance that comes up today. However, we will continue to hold FedSupport webinars on a regular basis to dig into additional topics. If you miss a talking point or want to revisit parts of our conversation that are most relevant to you, you can find the recording of this webinar as well as previous ones on our FedSupport Hub. The Hub not only contains webinar recordings, but also houses other critical information to support the federal workforce amid today's changing government landscape. With that, I'd like to welcome today's moderator, Sarah Sleggers, manager and recruiter at Raftelis. Thank you for joining us, Sarah, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. It's a pleasure to be here with the partnership and also with all of you out there who are taking time out of your evenings to join us today. I want to echo Mercedes' comments about how grateful we are for all the years of dedicated service that I'm sure collectively are out there in our audience. And really, we're here today because we do not want to lose these dedicated public servants, despite the fact that there are a lot of shifting grounds happening at the federal level. We're here today to encourage you, if you're looking to make a change, to think about local government service, which myself and my fellow panelists are all very passionate about. We here at Raftelis are a management consulting firm that works exclusively with local governments and utilities across the country. As Mercedes mentioned, I am a manager in our executive recruitment team, and I want to let our panelists introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with my colleague from Raftelis, Catherine Tuck-Parrish.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Catherine Tuck-Parrish. I am located in the DMV area physically, but we have work across the country. I am the lead of the executive services practice, which includes executive recruitment, coaching for both executives and other leadership positions. And we also conduct facilitated performance evaluations for board appointed folks. I have about 20 years of local government experience directly, and then about 15 years in management consulting. I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm Ann Lewis. I am also located in the DMV physically. Following 10 years in the private sector, I served close to 20 years in the public sector, all in Virginia. But I, too, have conducted executive searches across the United States over the past 5 to 7 years. It's a pleasure to be here this evening.
Roslyn.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Roslyn Gervin, Interim Human Resources Director for the City of Newport News in Virginia. I have 19 years of local government service in a various amount of capacities with the City of Newport News and an additional 6 with the City of Virginia Beach. So almost 27 years of local government service.
Just a few.
Just a few. Yeah, it goes fast.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And our firm's been privileged to work with the City of Newport News on several recruitments. So we're most excited to have Rosalind here with us today because she's on the front lines in local government human resources and sees a lot of federal applicants for roles, as we do with all the clients that we work with, particularly in the Washington, D.C. metro area. So the goal for today is to provide you with an overview of common local government structures. They do not all look the same. We will not be able to describe every single one, but we're going to give you a little primer. We're going to offer you some advice for how to translate your federal government experience to a local government role, and particularly how to position yourself with a human resources manager or a talent acquisition manager at the local level. That's often going to be the first person you're interacting with when you apply for a job. And then we're going to give you some ideas and strategies for finding a local government position that's right for you. So I have a number of questions I'm going to ask our panelists today around these topics. And as a reminder, you can use the Q&A function here in Zoom to ask questions throughout, and we will do our best to get to as many of those as you have. So to start, Catherine, I want to ask you if you could give our audience, again, high-level overview of just some common governance structures that we see at the local level, just to help folks kind of orient themselves when they're looking at job descriptions and open roles, kind of where that might fall.
Great. Well, as Sarah said, they're not all the same, but I would say in general, there is a governing body that's elected, not unlike Congress, but way smaller. Sometimes as few as 3, and then in some counties, as they kind of look like a legislative body, like up to 40 or so. But in general, it's a small governing body. They set the policy, and then and that's kind of the legislative body. And then you have kind of two main types of forms of government where the executive powers lie. So in a mayor council form, like you find in Washington, D.C., where you have an elected mayor, all the employees kind of report through the mayor. That is what we call kind of a mayor council form of government. And then we have a council manager form of government where the executive is actually vested in the council, and they have given that authority to an appointed city, county, town manager. And so that form was really to kind of depoliticize, and there's lots of history on that you can read if you're very bored. But the end result is you have a number of employees that work for this board. And it's geographically based. Political boundaries make a difference. So if I live on one street, I'm paying taxes, then fees that are associated with where I live. And if the boundary is in the middle of the street and Sarah lives on the other side, then she's paying taxes and getting services that might be slightly different in the next place. Generally, you have kind of a county structure, and there are lots of different ways that's organized, but courts, kind of the human services, things like that are typically detention facilities, typically in the county structure. And then cities and some towns have kind of more of the day-to-day services. Many of the counties also have day-to-day services for people that are kind of outside of a typical city. If you're in Virginia, that's a whole other thing. That's a different webinar, but that's typically how it is. The governing body is very, they go to the grocery store, they go to the schools, they see people on their street, and they're very accountable because they're literally seeing their taxpayers every single day. So it has a different, more immediate level of accountability than the town halls that you might be seeing televised, or I'm sure you've been to some. The other thing is that the day-to-day service delivery is things that people maybe don't even think about. I put my trash out, it gets picked up. I put the water on and it's clean. I call 911 and the police come or the ambulance comes. It's like those very day-to-day services that you might use every day, like the streets that you're on, but it also are things that maybe you don't need except periodically, but very personal, sort of locally driven. Decision making is local. And also you can see the impact of your work every day. So this is something that I think we'll come back to, but I want to just kind of stop there and we'll go on to the next question.
Thank you, Catherine. To make a broad generalization, I think a lot of federal employees are used to very large, specialized agencies that have very distinct hierarchies and chains of command. And Rosalind, I maybe want to ask you to take a first crack at this one. From your experience, I know the City of Newport News has a lot of current employees that came from the federal space. What do you think is the most significant kind of structural, but also organizational culture differences between a local government and working in the federal government? And how do you think that impacts the day-to-day life for a new senior manager?
A great question, and I'll piggyback just where Catherine left off of. You are face to face with the folks that you're providing services to. So even as in the senior roles, there's always this customer service, direct facing customer service component to your role. So even in a senior role, while you may not be, we call them boots on the ground, you are in that chain of command, whether you're overseeing the folks who are boots on the ground, or if a citizen has a concern about a service that they're receiving, or they concern is probably the best word to describe it, you are open access for those folks, for those citizens. At all levels of the organization, there isn't anyone that a citizen does not have the access to be able to talk to and voice their concerns. And that's when you get into things like accountability and transparency. Those are things that we have to live out every day, particularly if you have citizens who are super engaged in the civic process. So they're very aware of the services that they're supposed to be receiving. These are the folks that are going fine tooth comb through the budget. They're showing up at council meetings, and they are not just expecting local government folks to do what they say that they're going to do, but they're showing up in the venues to ask them in person, hey, this document says you're going to do XYZ. I don't see that happening in my street or in my neighborhood or in my civic community. So I think that's one of going back to the opportunity to see impact, the opportunity to put the things that you do on a day-to-day basis with a face. When somebody, oftentimes we talk about the concerns and complaints that citizens might have, but also the thank yous. That also comes along with it. The things that a citizen may have been struggling with for a while, drainage, and those are typical things we see that are long-term challenges that residents will face, and the impacts that can have on the way that they live. But in our roles throughout the organization, being able to put a name to a citizen, put a face to that project, and know that every day you're going out there and making an impact.
Sorry, I was struggling with my mute button. I totally agree, Rosalind. Thank you. I feel like being able to interact in person with folks who are directly benefiting from your work is one of the best parts about local government service. And interested in your thoughts and advice for federal career federal employees who are applying for local government positions on how to kind of defederalize your resume. I know that federal resumes are a whole cottage industry. What's your advice for folks on effectively translating all of this extremely valuable experience they have at the federal level to a local government role, particularly in their application materials?
Yeah, and that's your first impression, right? So people are reading your cover letter, your resume, and they have to understand what you're doing and and acronyms, federal jargon, really specialized program names, they're going to be hard to understand. I might not understand it as a reader, and I might not even pass it along to the next person. So you want to make sure that you can get your foot in the door past that first person who's reading it. And so that's your first impression. You've got to resonate with your human resource professionals or the hiring managers. So I would look at the job descriptions, at those local government job descriptions. I would look at the keywords and phrases and ensure that they're in my materials and my cover letter and resume, and that they, align with my experience as well, right? So you've got to make sure that it's translating the work that you do at the federal level into the achievements. And I look at answering the question, so what? What are the results? What is the impact of your contributions? Some of these massive federal initiatives have very tangible outcomes, and it might be in areas of project management, it might be budgeting, policy development, stakeholder engagement, compliance. There are very transferable, those are universal, those are directly applicable to local governments and local needs. So showcase how you manage these complex systems, the diverse teams, the large budgets that you have at the federal level, and how that makes you an asset that you can be at the local level. You can understand that landscape of local government. And then I would frame your experience around problem solving relevant to these local community challenges, how your past work, even if it's in a different context, equips you to address the needs that a city or a county has. And probably most importantly, again, articulate the why you want to serve at the local level, how your federal experience aligns with that intrinsic motivation to make you to make a difference in the community. That really resonates with someone who's reading your materials. If you can say what it is that makes you so interested and passionate about the work that you do and the difference that you can make in a local community.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question in the chat that I think we could go down a rabbit hole on. So I'm gonna rapid fire ask the three of you. Someone asked, is it the case that resumes for local government jobs need to be 2 pages?
I think it's be concise, make sure that you certainly answer, demonstrate your experience. There's not a magic number, but, people get lost when they start reading small novels. And so getting the materials out there in a concise and way that really describes your impact is important.
Catherine, anything you want to add?
Just that if you have I sometimes see this with federal and other folks that have, given a lot of presentations, written a lot of articles. Make a site that people can go to it. Do not list everyone, because that is what I see. Those don't always translate well. But have it in your LinkedIn information or something like that that people can easily get to, and you can that'll shorten up some of it. But no magic number. But if you've been working for 30 years, 2 pages is probably not enough. If you've been working for 1, probably it's plenty.
Rosalind, I see you nodding.
Totally agree with what Anne and Catherine have said. One thing that I see often is, for us, we still manually screen all applications where we don't use any sort of AI technology at this point. And certain people will assume what's relevant and what's not relevant. My advice to them is, let us decide, because what you may be leaving off the resume, we may find very transferable and we'll count that as relevant experience. But to the concise point, yes, show how you were impactful in that role. So someone who has a very tenured career, 2 pages may not do it, as long as each entry, to Anne's point, is showing, relevancy, impact, put, all the experience. You've worked for it, you've earned it, and no one can advocate for you better than you, and that's what the resume is for.
I think that's all excellent advice. I want to transition a little bit. Catherine, maybe we can start with you. Beyond just looking at job boards, so Indeed, LinkedIn, things like that, what are some effective strategies or maybe lesser known channels to the federal audience to look for local government job opportunities?
So, I would say just like there are great places of associations that you probably belong to in the federal world, there are local government associations for almost every profession in the that are specializing in local government. So if you have an engineering degree, you might want to look for those that are targeting that in the local government world. ICMA is NLC. These are the International City and County Management Association. See, I'm doing what you shouldn't do. The National League of Cities, which is like an umbrella organization, and National Association of Counties, which is like an umbrella organization, one for cities and one for counties. You can find lots of great links from both of those. The International City and County Management Association also links to different states. So if you're located across the country, you might want to look in different geographic areas. It can link you to some of the state associations. But I would say finding where your profession fits into the local government world is going to be probably the most important thing you can do to link to something, in addition to, of course, getting on websites and signing up if you have like an area you're interested in. Um, I think putting if you're not wanting to move and you live in a place, you currently live in a local government. It could be a city, a county, a town, village. Start there. Learn what they're doing. Go, sign up for their alerts. Leveraging your network on LinkedIn is really important. So focusing on your network and people who might know people, you can always see what other connections and other people like that, just really spending time making some connections, introducing yourself, tracking what's going on in your own community. I think somebody was asking in the chat about that, sort of a tangential question, but understanding what the issues are that are happening locally. There's some definitely things that are happening across the country, but there are very localized issues that are happening. The impacts on federal work could be very different depending on the impact on the state and how that's trickling down. And so you want to understand what's going on locally. That can be a great place to sort of learn too. You're going to have much more ability to do simple things like go to city events, go to a chamber of commerce event, go to find out what kind of volunteer opportunities. That's a great way to network. There's a lot of ways that you can like just stay kind of where you are and look and see what's possible, even if that's not the place you end up working or finding something for you. It can give you a lot of education. You already know that community because you live there. Lots of local governments and some state associations are having, kind of regional or localized job fairs. There's a lot of need in some very specific areas and in frontline, and a lot of gaps in leadership positions just with the baby boomers leaving. So there's a lot of opportunities, and I'd encourage you to think about smaller and mid-sized organizations that might have a specialized need that you have experience in that they might not get any other way. And also talk to when you have an opportunity, if you can connect with someone in your own community or in a nearby community or a friend of a friend, just have an informational interview. Hey, I want to just learn more about what you do. Everybody likes to talk about their job. So find out more about what they do and then ask them, hey, what would you suggest? You're not asking for a job, you're asking for more information. They may know someone, those connections you may find out, they may refer you. Who else could I talk to? Encourage you to just reach out in through LinkedIn and other ways, but have some conversations with people to learn what you can. I'm sure others have more suggestions.
Yeah, I'm just going to add, we have a question in the Q&A that said, I've heard for private sector jobs, networking and knowing someone who works for the company you're applying for can increase your chances. And is that also true in local government? So I'll just add my 2 cents that I think networking is great no matter what industry you're trying to work in. But Catherine, you just touched on the importance of having informational interviews and connecting with folks in your community. And Anne and Rosalind, I don't know if you have other thoughts on that point.
I think the more you expose yourself to people, particularly who are in the local government space, it provides you more access for information. So if I have a personal connection with someone who I know is looking for, and I'll use jobs that we recruit for, engineering or project managers, I will remember to reach out to them when those opportunities present themselves. We are an equitable agency, and everybody goes through our competitive process the same. So it doesn't necessarily give you a leg up in the selection process, but it may point your attention to a position or a job that maybe you didn't think to look for, unless somebody in your network knew to refer you to apply to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting jobs in local government that folks just don't even know are available. And so, looking at what Catherine and Rosalind have described are great intros, and it can really open up opportunities to what if and what else, and can make connections in other ways that could certainly be beneficial.
Thank you. Rosalind, from your perspective, and either if you want to make it specific to the Newport News area or just in general, what kind of specific skills or leadership styles do you think local governments are looking for recently, like, this year, the last couple of years? And what would your advice be to federal applicants on how best to highlight their skills in that area?
I think some of the most successful folks in my experience are those who are collaborators. Very few situations happen in a local government that are isolated. So we're often looking for somebody who can see the bigger picture and recognize, okay, we have a citizen who has continuously complained about, maybe I keep using drainage because it's a very popular topic. And if we are very one-sided about this solution, we may just address the pipes. However, a collaborator is going to see, well, you know what, the street is also due to be reconstructed. And let's pull in the Public Works Department, let's pull in the Public Utilities Department so that we can manage this as one big project versus every couple of months there's disruption in the neighborhood because we're treating these as individual issues and communities are coming in. So anything that highlights the opportunity to be able to show collaboration. Local government runs off tax dollars as the primary source of income. So resourcefulness is going to be an amazing skill to be able to show how you've been able to do less with more. One of the questions that popped up in the chat was related to federal dollars and how that impacts local government hiring. Local government services are always going to be needed. And I don't want to get on a tangent related to stability in local government, but folks are always going to need clean water, roads to travel on, their trash picked up. So those resources, regardless of what the funding looks like, local government will always have to be creative to make sure that we can provide those resources. So as a skill set, being able to show that you can maneuver in those challenging situations when things are tough is going to be something that really stands out. And the last thing that I'll add, in addition to collaboration, is the opportunity to show that you can work with various groups of people, because again, very little happens in local government where you are in a silo. And that means you're going to be faced with lots of different variety and personalities and challenges, but somebody who is resilient and can show that flexibility is really going to stand out for us as somebody that would make a good fit for us in our organization.
Thank you. And Catherine, anything you want to add on this one?
I think Rosalind covered it well. I think one other thing that I would say is that local governments have kind of needs for generalists because of some of what Rosalind was talking about. I think somebody else mentioned kind of problem solving, like seeing what's possible. And so someone who can kind of pull up from maybe a special area of interest and look more broadly. And the other thing I would say is someone who can help build consensus. Because in local government, one of the things I would say is we don't always have just one right answer. That can be more than one right answer. And so how can you find the best options to fit the needs of lots of folks? And that includes consensus building skills.
I think I'll add to this is, I think about technology, and certainly there are lots of our positions in local government that are hands-on, boots on the street, very physical. And then there are lots of positions that have specialized technology, have different software programs to use. And so being adept and keeping your skill set in technology and the very fast changing world of technology that we are in right now, and how to utilize some of these new tools that are coming at us very fast. And there's some federal legislation about some of those tools, AI, that's coming down to the state and that's coming down to federal. But how do we use those tools effectively? How do we use them in a smart way that is producing very good results for our communities? But there's a lot of different tools and software that are specific to some of the work that is, when I think of mainly in office. But then there continues to be these relationships with the state and federal, which have their own software programs as well that sometimes run in parallel, sometimes are completely separate, and you're having to work several different types of programs. So I think it's important to for some of those positions to keep up your technology skill set too.
Great call out. We have a few questions in the Q&A that are related to this next question that I wanted to ask. Some of these I'm like, oh no, I don't feel this way. Someone said, are you seeing that being a Fed is a dirty word? Should we attempt to de-emphasize federal government as our employer or otherwise counteract negative stereotypes about us? And I read that out because it is related to my next question, which is, what advice do you have for candidates on counteracting the perception that some local government hiring managers might have that the experience doesn't translate? If the audience out there walks away with nothing else this evening, I hope you walk away with understanding that myself and our panelists all think that your federal government experience is highly translatable, and we want you going after these local government roles, and we want to help you. So I do not think it's a dirty word. In fact, we want you. We want you in the local government workforce. I think the challenge is translating for folks that aren't familiar with what work at the federal level looks like. So, Anne, since you're right here, I'll start with you. What advice do you have on how to effectively convey how valuable that experience is for a local government employer?
I think it's helpful to have someone else read your materials, someone who's not in your sphere, because if they can understand it, that's kind of one of your first steps. Again, I talked about that cover letter and resume being your first impression, and similar to what Rosalind said, we read every cover letter and resume. I don't believe the cover letter is dead. It is an absolute opportunity for you to augment what you have in your resume with some either example or some additional information about a project or something that shows your passion for the commitment to service. And so I think that having someone else read your materials and having it in your voice, something that's authentic, that sounds like you. There's certainly technology out there that I've seen folks use to be able to craft some materials, but when it doesn't sound like you, then it's not as compelling, I think is how I'd phrase that. But there's having that first go at getting in the door and understanding the work that you do, and it needs to be something transferable, because if it's way far out from, if you're applying for a job that really doesn't seem to be in your wheelhouse, then you're probably not going to move forward. So it needs to be in a position that makes sense for you, and in presenting your materials that are authentically you, and in a way that our other folks are able to understand.
Love that, Anne. Thank you. Catherine, Roslyn, anything else you'd want to add?
You go first, Rosalind, if you have something.
And I feel bad because I'm like, I have something for all the questions. So to reiterate, no, we absolutely welcome the federal workforce to consider local government. And one of the questions that was put in the chat, how do we feel about local government practitioners who went federal and want to come back local? We welcome you. We welcome you back. And I think it just, again, it boils down to making sure that your experience is digestible, and not wanting to throw in every single accomplishment in that resume, because then it does get overwhelming for the hiring manager, particularly for those positions that are very popular and that hiring manager is trying to maneuver through a lot of resumes. Being able to boil it down, each entry, into how you made impact. So I always advise folks, less words, more numbers. So things like percent increase, percent decrease, things that show volume, because that then allows the hiring manager to be able to see apples to apples. Can you manage the scope of work that I know is going to be imperative for this particular role? So no, it's not a dirty word, and not something that when a hiring manager sees federal service, more than likely what's been happening is they've been overwhelmed perhaps by the amount of information that's on the resume, and they're finding it difficult to try to navigate through it.
I concur with what folks have said. I would just add that, and this is kind of on you as the person who knows what you've done the best. You really need to spend some time thinking about what your actual skills are and what kind of work you like to do and where your profession sort of fits in. And that may take a little bit of time and effort. And so we definitely do see people who are kind of applying for everything. And that is, I understand that. I've done that before. I get it, but it's probably not the best use of your time, because you're not going to be able to customize it, like Anne said. You're not going to be able to have the relevance and be able to show that well, like Rosalind said. And so I just encourage you to think about, and like Anne said, maybe get a friend to make sure your information is understandable. And also, you should be able to explain what this job is that you're going for. Like, what is it that you would do there? And what is it that you have done? And if you can answer those questions to someone who doesn't know anything about what you used to do and what you're going to do next and what this job is, then you're probably on your way.
Yeah, I think about, it's your story to tell, right? No one knows your story, as you said, Catherine, better than you. And so you've got to advocate, you've got to be able to tell your story, and you've got to be able to tell it in a compelling way, because if you just ramble on and don't make connections to or give examples if you're in an interview process, then you kind of lose that person. And so it takes practice. And I know that you may have been in a position for a period of time and you haven't had to do this for a while. And literally practice with a friend, practice in the mirror. There's going to be the tough questions. I was talking to someone the other day who was terminated from their position. And I said, you've got to have an answer for that. And I said, first, write down your answer and then start telling speak your answer out loud. You've got to practice to be able to tell your story in your voice in a way that is, again, compelling and authentic. It's so important to be yourself as you go through this process.
Great advice. Okay, our chat is blowing up. We have so many questions. But before we get there, I want to say that that for attendees, the partnership is going to initiate a survey here in a minute to get your input on how helpful you thought this session was and any topics that you might want to see from them in the future. So while we are wrapping up and getting through as many things in the Q&A as we can, if you could answer those 4 questions in the survey, I know they would appreciate it. Your responses will be anonymous and they'll be used to inform future sessions. Do have one last question for you all, but I want to try to get to some of these the questions that folks have been asking. Sorry, just want to find one. When, if ever, do you, as you panelists, think it's appropriate to reach out to a local government HR office for feedback on an application when you get a rejection? Rosalind, do you want to take that one?
I do. Absolutely. I think those are some of the best conversations when someone sees that they've not been selected for a role and they reach out for the feedback, because what I would hate for someone to do is to continue to make the same mistakes that cause them to be rejected for that particular position and it be a really easy fix. So I have had countless conversations with candidates who I know we've been talking a lot about paring down resumes and applications, but in some cases, it was not being descriptive enough that the hiring manager couldn't figure out what the role was, only to find out had they been more descriptive, they would have been able to move through in the process. So we are always available. And I think, again, that's the beauty of that local government service that I described when we first got on the call. That applies to roles in departments like mine and human resources. We have walked candidates through in person. We will do it over the phone. So absolutely. There is, again, that transparency. Candidates are able to see the feedback that the hiring manager wrote about them specifically, not about the other candidates, but for them to be able to see what was written about them specifically in an interview process. Again, all for the opportunity to tweak and improve for the next opportunity. And we've seen folks be really successful from taking the opportunity for that career coaching that I know our office willingly provides.
Anne, Catherine, anything else you all want to add?
Yeah, I think just that you have to also remember sort of the numbers that people are dealing with. So you probably won't want to ask if you get 20 no's. You might want to kind of hone in, like, what am I learning? Is there anything that you can see, like Rosalind said, on the feedback? If not, if there was one that you really, 2 or 3 that maybe you felt like you really did have the skills, seek that on there. Just be respectful of people's time and don't argue, maybe. It's not like a hearing officer sort of situation. It's like a learning and listening, and also kind of a two-way communication, like Rosalind said. But it's not generally relitigating. It's kind of, what can I learn from that?
All right. There's someone who says, I've been actively looking for local government jobs at the department director and assistant town or city manager level, but most of the jobs require local experience. Do you have any advice on how to effectively address that requirement, or should we just skip because they clearly don't want feds?
I will take an unpopular view initially, and then my colleagues. So I think I used to talk to still talk to lots of folks who are coming out of the military, and they might have been, a very high level command in the military, and they wanted to kind of be a city manager because they felt I've had thousands of troops under me, and they had lots of great and have lots of great leadership experience, but they might not be able to go from the top to the top when you change from one sort of sector industry to another. But you might go from a top level to kind of a mid-level. And I'd be looking for smaller places that are going to really need those skills. Um, I think it's what I would recommend is that you look to see maybe what it sounds like you are doing, those assistant director positions, program manager positions, if you can find a way in. And this is a time where I might definitely be checking in with those folks to ask, hey, I've been applying. Here's how I feel like my experience would fit. Is there another way for me to get in besides here? I mean, sometimes just having a conversation, there may be something else that opens up. It is hard. I mean, if I went to go for a high level federal government job, I would not get it because I don't have any federal experience. And so figuring out how to translate across, maybe not at the very top level, but maybe like one rung down, perhaps, as a way in. Now, you all can come at me. That's probably not popular, but what do you all think?
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's hard, but it's, how to get in is, it's the first goal, and then showing that demonstrating and doing the work can help you move up as well.
We did, I will say, as a point of happiness and hope, um, we have had successful federal employees get to assistant director and department level positions. And they were able to demonstrate that. I think many of the most transferable ones are in kind of internal services. And I noticed somebody in the chat was asking about some key skills, and so we may get to that question. But I think there is a lot of transference that is easy to explain and easy for local governments to see how those are the same. It's when you're kind of changing sector, kind of changing from narrow to wide or way bigger to small that is harder, and you're going to have a more of an uphill battle.
Yeah, I agree. Someone said, I'm asking about framing leaving the federal government to move into local government. Some of us are choosing to leave, and some of us were forced to leave. Any thoughts on how to address that in an application? I'm going to chime in and say I would love to see that addressed in a cover letter. I'm with Anne. I pay close attention to cover letters. If someone has had a number of short tenured jobs, or they have some gaps in their resume, or they are changing fields, if they take the time to give some context around that in the cover letter, I am way more likely to give their resume a closer read. It's good to have that context.
And be honest, you're not alone. You're not alone. And so, having that vulnerability and honesty and transparency speaks volumes.
And I've seen people just put kind of on their resume, and maybe address it in their cover letter too, but just literally put on their resume in case it's only read by a machine, something about, you took the outer, whatever it was, downsized as part of 10,000 other people, or, something like that that gives context, I think is helpful.
All right. We have someone who said, I've been applying to local government jobs for the past few months, but the problem I'm running into is the long timeline before hearing something back, or some employers never reviewing my application. I appreciate that manual, human reviews are happening, but what advice do you have for someone who wants to work in local government but needs a job right now? Rosalind, I see you talking, but we can't hear you.
Maybe just closer to the mic.
Shoot. All right. Well, Anne or Catherine, do you want to start, and we'll get back to Rosalind in just a sec.
Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, I was thinking, when we're doing an executive search at a department level, or the city or town manager level, oftentimes that's 16 to 20 weeks. And, we pride ourselves in communicating with candidates, but things happen. And we're always willing to take a phone call. Hey, where are we at in the process? Can you give me an update? And we'll absolutely do that. We try to do that regularly throughout the process, but in case you haven't heard from us as an executive search firm, we would be happy for you to reach out to us to do that. And finding out the status of an application, I know that there's some programs or sites that will provide an update, but when I've gone through the process, I've reached out to someone on LinkedIn who I think was in human resources and said, can you help me? Can you point me to someone who might be able to give me an update? I think it's very, shows some initiative that you care about where you're at, and you want to be part of their organization, and you don't want to miss something that maybe an email bounced back or something that you're not aware of. I think that's all helpful part of the process. It does take some time, I get it, especially at the higher levels in an organization, because we're trying to meet the, maybe the calendar scheduling of some other folks, and things happen in communities and from those day-to-day operations that they need to respond to. But we try to stick to a timeline and make adjustments and be nimble where needed, so that we can meet the community's timeline as well.
Rosalind, you want to do a mic check and see if we can hear you? Shoot, we still can't.
She's on mute right now. There we go.
Okay.
That one worked?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I forgot the train of thought now.
Timeline.
Yeah.
Yes,
Long timelines, but
timeline.
simplicity for the
Yes.
candidate.
So yes, there is a lot of due diligence that goes into the hiring process, because we have to ensure that everything is defensible. So it does add to the timeline. If the one thing that I would suggest, if somebody is in a super tight timeline, is to not forget about the local temporary agencies. And the reason I bring them up as a resource is because we do use temp agencies to fill immediate needs while we are working on the long-term strategy for filling a position. And those are really quick turnarounds. Those agencies are really looking to place folks really quickly. And then oftentimes that's your opportunity beyond the resume and the cover letter to show that you are a good fit for the organization. And oftentimes when it's time to recruit for that position, it's going to go a lot quicker because you have already kind of proven yourself. It's almost like an internal opportunity to be considered as an external candidate coming in through that temporary agency if somebody really is in finding themselves a situation where they need a really quick turnaround.
That is an awesome call out, Rosalind. I know when I worked directly in local government, I sat in an IT department, and we had tons of folks that came to us from temp agencies that we kept on permanently once the budget became available for the role. the Chief Information Security Officer started out with us as a temp. So that's a great foot in the door if there's a particular organization that you're really trying to work with. There are a few questions in our Q&A about some specific temp agencies to look at, specific job boards to look at. We are going to put together a one-pager of links to a lot of these different things that we've mentioned here today that we're hoping the partnership can make available to you. So stay tuned. And I'll also, I think I can speak for everyone. Please, connect with us on LinkedIn, stay in touch, send us your questions. We would love to be available to you and help you even after today's session. I want to kind of segue into our kind of closing, which is to ask each one of you panelists, just real quick, what are your parting thoughts for all the attendees out here today as they think about transitioning into local government service? And Rosalind, I'll start with you since you're front and center for me.
Stay persistent. Don't get discouraged. That right opportunity is just one application away. You'll never know if you don't apply, and seek out that good feedback. But I think the last things is for sure to stay encouraged. We were, from a local government perspective, while we were disheartened to hear about all of our federal colleagues who would be displaced, it also gave us some insight into opportunities for us to fill roles that had been vacant for a really long time. So again, I can't reiterate it enough that we welcome you to apply with open arms.
Catherine?
Well, she kind of took mine. I would say, if you want to make a difference, and I know you do because that's why you're in public service, give local government a shot, stay with it. Don't be afraid to take a lateral or even maybe what seems like a step back to take that big leap later. I encourage you to learn more about places that you might want to work and then apply.
I was looking at one of the questions earlier, and it was talking about the pay plans, and it got me to thinking about, and we talked about the stability of local government, and so there is going to be some transferable. You're gonna have to look at the compensation and benefits because they could vary and may not always match the federal package, but you have great stability in local government. And I think that, we talked a great deal about being prepared and adapting to the change in the scope of the work, maybe even the proximity of your work. You've got to decide, what's your radius of where you want to work, what kind of commute may you want to have, or are you prepared to move for a position? And then, again, what everyone has said about the nature of public service and the passion for serving communities and in the end making people's lives better in some form or fashion.
Thank you all so much. Mercedes, we're going to turn it over to you to wrap things up.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here this evening. We know that everyone is busy and we appreciate you sharing your valuable time with us. Please keep the questions and topics coming, and we'll try to get to them in upcoming discussions in our FedSupport series webinars. And don't forget to visit our FedSupport website for federal employees. In the meantime, you can find upcoming webinar topics, FAQs, blogs, and links to additional resources, as well as the recording of this session and previous webinars. You can also visit Raftelis' job page and the City of Newport News' HR site, which Sam is including in the chat right now. For all of the federal employees out there, thank you for your service to the country, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate everyone attending, and thank you to our panelists.